All right, today we're going to connect two things from the internet that, on the surface, have absolutely nothing to do with each other. We've got this strange, quiet social habit on one side, and on the other, a really terrifying new kind of horror. And believe it or not, they tell a fascinating story about the world we live in right now.
Okay, so let's just dive right into this puzzle. Now, I know it might sound like a huge stretch, but stick with me here. By the end of this, you're going to see how a blank look and a haunted VHS tape are basically pulling from the exact same playbook. So let's start with a weird social tick you might have even seen for yourself.
People are calling it the Gen Z stare. You've probably seen the TikToks, the articles, all the debates online. It's that blank, kind of unfocused, and yeah, often unsmiling look. You know, it's that moment in a conversation where you're expecting some kind of reaction, and you just get, well, nothing.
Now, the knee-jerk reaction for a lot of people is to just write this off as a moral thing. You know, kids these days, they're lazy, they're disrespectful. But the much more interesting question people are starting to ask is, what if it isn't really a choice? What if the stare is actually a sign of something much bigger, a huge shift in how we actually connect with each other?
So psychologists and cultural commentators have actually broken it down. It's not just someone zoning out. It's this direct but totally flat kind of engagement. And that last point, that's a really big deal. For a generation that's pretty skeptical of that super polished, always on, smile for the camera culture, this neutral look can actually be a kind of honesty, like a refusal to perform happiness just because you're supposed to. So, what's the actual psychology here? I mean, if it's not just being rude, what is it? Well, the theory goes that it's not just about being terminally online. It's about how our brains are being fundamentally rewired by the very way we interact online. Just think about it for a second. Most of our digital life is built on these super quick, super simple signals. You get a text, you send back a thumbs up. You see a photo, you hit the like button. Our brains get really, really good at looking for these easy cues to tell us how to respond. That's signal dependency. And this is what happens next. When you're in a messy, unpredictable face-to-face conversation and all those digital cues are gone, a brain that's been trained to wait for them can just get overwhelmed. It's like a computer that hasn't gotten the right command. It just hangs. It freezes. And that blank stare, that's the freeze. You're seeing it in real time.
So to really get it, you can think about these three different ways we experience things. Liminal is that real, in-the-moment, authentic connection. Superliminal is when you're basically performing for an audience, like an influencer crafting the perfect post. And non-liminal is just that zoned-out, passive scrolling state. The stare seems to happen when our liminal, our real-world skills, get a little rusty. Our performance scripts don't fit the situation, and so we just default to that passive, non-liminal waiting mode.
Okay, now here is where it gets really weird, and honestly, a lot more interesting. This exact same feeling, this loss of authentic, unscripted reality, is being explored in a whole new and completely terrifying genre of art. So let's pivot into the world of horror, because the parallel is, well, it's pretty creepy. Meet analog horror. The whole idea is to create new digital videos that look and feel like they're from a pre-digital time. It copies the fuzzy sound, the tracking errors on the screen, the weird visuals of old tapes, all to make you feel like you just stumbled on some lost, forbidden piece of media. And this quote from the Soslin Journal just absolutely nails its power. It taps into that collective memory we have of a time that maybe felt simpler or safer, the era of big, clunky VHS tapes and late-night TV, and it twists that warm, nostalgic feeling into something genuinely unnerving. It turns a happy memory into a source of dread. And these are the classic tools of the trade. You see it in things like emergency broadcasts that suddenly get hijacked with cryptic warnings, or home videos where the degraded VHS quality reveals something wrong in the fuzzy background. It's all about taking these familiar formats and corrupting them to give you that powerful, creepy feeling that you're watching something you should not be seeing. And trust me, this is not just some tiny niche thing on the internet anymore. There are two huge examples that really show how this genre just exploded from these little experimental web series into a massive cultural force. So back in 2015, a series called Local 58 really pioneered this whole look and feel. The short videos were disguised as these old broadcasts from a local TV station, and they basically wrote the rules for the genre. Deeply unsettling warnings about looking at the moon, or a government contingency plan that advises, well, something called the victory position.
It was so strange and so effective. But the idea truly went supernova with the Backrooms. This was based on an old internet urban legend about accidentally falling out of reality. Kane Parsons' short found footage film became a massive viral hit. I mean, that number you see, 69 million views, that's just for the first video. It tapped into this deep, primal fear of empty, transitional spaces.
And this timeline just shows you the incredible speed of it all. In less than a decade, analog horror goes from a cult web series to a major Hollywood film deal with A24, which, is one of the most respected studios out there. This is not a small trend. It's a legitimate cultural movement.
So, here's the big reveal, the point where we bring these two threads back together. We've got a social behavior, the stare, and an art form, analog horror. They seem totally different, but they're actually growing from the exact same anxiety.
And when you put them side by side, the connection just clicks into place. The Gen Z stare is the real-world symptom of our liminal, our authentic, social skills getting weaker. It's the freeze, the awkward silence when a real, unscripted moment happens. Analog horror, on the other hand, is the art that comes from that loss. It creates these stories that are haunted by the ghost of a world that was all liminal, all unscripted, and it finds the absolute terror in the distorted memory of that world.
So, in the end, they are both products of a culture where those messy, authentic, in-between moments of life are just disappearing. The stare is what happens when we forget how to navigate those spaces. And analog horror is the art we make that both mourns that loss and turns it into a monster. And that leaves us with this final, really critical question. The Gen Z stare and the rise of analog horror. They're not just internet fads, they're signals. They're pointing to something fundamental being worn away in how we connect to each other. In a world that's being designed more and more for smooth, easy, mediated interactions, figuring out how to preserve that messy, authentic, liminal space might just be one of our biggest challenges.